All right, I wanted to sneak in a quick recording here before the Arkansas-Georgia game comes on at noon Eastern Time on ESPN. Let's talk about some of the top 2022 NFL draft prospects from both these schools that we'll actually get to see today. So again, this is only guys who are redshirt sophomores. They're older, juniors are eligible, seniors are eligible. Guys who are not eligible include freshmen, true sophomores. Those guys can't go to the NFL draft. But redshirt sophomores can. And speaking of redshirt sophomores, quarterback KJ Jefferson for the Arkansas Razorbacks. He's a good player right now. He's benefited a lot from catching runs from Treylon Burks, and we'll talk about in a minute. So far this season, I don't envision him being anything more than a late day 3 prospect if he went to the NFL draft this year. But just someone to keep an eye on, though, because I think there is room for growth. He's certainly, like I said, he has 2 more years potentially in college. So there's a lot of room for him to grow and develop. But right now, decent quarterback, decent guy to watch. Can certainly win games to Arkansas. It's not going to hold them back per se against most competition, but maybe against a team like Georgia, you might see some of the issues there. I already said his name, but Treylon Burks has got to be one of the most exciting receivers in this draft class just because of how big he is. He's got this height, weight, speed combination that every team is searching for right now in the NFL. We've seen guys go after playing dudes like that. Obviously, DK Metcalf's the one everyone knows about. I'm not saying that Burks is DK Metcalf, but he is 6'3", we're between 225, 230 in that range. And he runs fairly well. He can run past defenders. He can stack corners. He can beat safeties over the top. So there's a lot to like about him. And he started the year off kind of slow, but the past 2 games, I think he's had 100 yards each of the past 2 weeks, including some very big plays. I think he had it's not showing me here. I wish I could see it because I know there was a really long play he had last week. That was just incredible. I forget what it was. But over the past, put it this way, over the past 2 games, he averaged 42.3 yards per reception against Georgia Southern 2 weeks ago. And he averaged 27.8 yards per reception against Texas A&M this past week. Over that time, he's got almost 300 receiving yards in those 2 weeks alone. So he's playing really well. And again, playing against a team like Texas A&M, which is ranked, I think, 7th in the nation at the point in time, just shows you how good of a player he is. He can play against elite competition, play well. It's not all against Georgia Southern or any of those kind of like low-ranking teams. Junior center, Ricky Stromberg is a guy I would keep an eye on. Probably an day 3 selection. This guy is good. He's not going to be up there with the guys you really want to keep an eye on as being, wow, these are high-caliber centers who can actually make a starting level impact in the NFL. He's not one of those guys, but just someone to keep an eye on here. Probably their best edge rusher, Trey Williams. He's a senior for them. He's a transfer, I believe, I forget from where. I think he's from Missouri. He came out and had a pretty big impact this past weekend. I think he had 3 sacks last week. Was either 3 sacks or 2.5. He's at 4 so far for the season for Arkansas. And again, coming up big against Texas A&M, he already had 2 sacks. No, 2 sacks. Yeah, 2 sacks last year against Texas A&M. 1.5 against Georgia Southern, and then half a sack against Texas earlier this year. So that's where his sacks are coming from so far. 4.5 tackles for loss. He is their best edge rusher, so if they're going to get any kind of pressure against Georgia, it's probably going to come from him. Senior linebacker Grant Morgan's another guy I would keep an eye on. He's been there for, it feels like forever at this point. I think this is like his 5th year because of the extra year of eligibility from COVID-19. But last year, he had 110 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and interception. This year, off to a pretty good start as well. 25 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, half a sack. So guy does a little bit of everything. And again, we've seen players like this in the past who really go to the NFL. They're in the late round picks. They just play special teams their entire career. He might end up being one of those guys because he's only 5'11", not very big, 235. So there's going to be limitations there for the NFL level, but you certainly still want to keep an eye on someone who's as productive as him playing against SEC level competition where you're constantly getting really good players. Montaric Brown, I believe that's how you say his name. He's a cornerback for Arkansas. He already has 2 interceptions this year. Probably the better of the corners they have so far on that roster. What year is he? Let me check real quick with my notes. He's a senior corner, so he's getting up there, 6 foot, about 190 pounds. Solid player overall. And again, this is a loaded cornerback class, though, so you might see guys like Brown float down the list. But if you catch an eye, maybe get in a showcase event after the season, that could really help him out in terms of elevating his draft stock. Last guy I want to talk about on Arkansas, redshirt sophomore safety Jalen Catalon. Very mixed bag of emotions when it comes to him. He pops off the tape when you look at him. He makes a lot of big plays. Already has 2 interceptions this year, 3 last year. My concern is that his coverage numbers are not fantastic. And again, if you're not a great cover safety, it's very hard to play you in the NFL. Like, they have box safeties, yes, but box safeties are not guys you really want to spend first-round picks on. I've seen some people view him as a first-round pick, so I would disagree with that evaluation. I've seen some people view him as a round 2 or round 3 selection. I've seen him go as low as round 5. I really don't know what he is at this point. I'm going to have to wait and see. It's kind of like playing a waiting game here for Jalen Catalan. But again, he does have that high-level ceiling where there are people saying that he could be a top 50 prospect, which is something to keep an eye on. And he's probably the most well-known player on this defense. Swapping it over, let's talk about Georgia. Got Redshirt junior quarterback JT Daniels, obviously a USC transfer, who's had some big games for them after a very slow start against Clemson. It'll be very interesting to see how he plays against Arkansas's defense, because Arkansas really battered Texas A&M last week. Granted, Texas A&M's quarterback is not nearly as good as JT Daniels, but there's a chance this Arkansas defense is the best they've seen this year. And I say that with all due respect to, I went to Clemson, and Clemson's defense week 1 was fairly healthy and was dominant against Georgia. JT Daniels lost that game. But this Arkansas defense is rolling, and they're hot right now. So this is definitely the best defense they've faced since Clemson, and could be on par with that Clemson defense. So we'll see how JT Daniels holds up against another elite defensive unit. 2 guys you really should know about on Georgia that just aren't playing this game because of injuries from last year. Junior wide receiver George Pickens. This is a guy who has potential first-round hype, just not going to play because, again, injuries. And the sophomore wide receiver Dominick Blaylock also out for this game. They do have some offensive weapons, though, other than those two. Junior running back Zamir White is someone everyone talks about. He's going to be a mid-round selection to a late-round selection in the NFL draft. Georgia always produces these good running backs. He's the next guy in line, but he's not going to be on the same level as someone like a Nick Chubb or even a Sonny Michel coming out of college. He's not going to be that guy, but he's still going to be taken, probably, like I said, in the mid-rounds of the draft. I think anywhere between round 4 and 5 would probably be the best fit for someone like Zamir White, because he doesn't get a ton of carries necessarily in the Georgia offense right now. I don't think it showcases him the best it could. But again, at the NFL level, when you're doing running back by committee, everything's a little bit different. One player in the offensive line for Georgia I really want to focus on, senior left tackle Jamari Sailor. I believe that's how I say his last Jamari Salyer. Excuse me. I always messed up. I messed it up last time I talked about Georgia as well. But yeah, he's the only offensive lineman I really would keep an eye on for Georgia this year. Decent player. Not going to be a first-round kind of guy, but maybe a mid-round selection somewhere in that area. And then defensive line for Georgia, obviously, let's just go right into it. Adam Anderson, this guy's trending to being a first-round pick this year. He's been phenomenal so far. Everyone loves what he's done so far. And this is a deep edge class, by the way. But even in that very deep edge class, it's going to produce maybe 5, maybe even 7 first-round picks. Anderson belongs in that group. Now, granted, he is a little undersized, which is going to be an issue. Him and Nolan Smith, to me, the size, it could be a bit of a difficult thing to get over in the NFL level. You can't play them as true defensive ends. Obviously, they're going to have to be outside linebackers. But even for outside linebackers, they're both 235. So that's a bit of a concern there. I'm not saying it won't work, but most successful outside linebackers are at least 250. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, highly productive players. Senior edge rusher Adam Anderson. And as I kind of mentioned a little bit briefly there, junior edge rusher Nolan Smith, who already has 2.5 sacks this year. He has 2.5 sacks actually in 3 consecutive years now. We'll see if he can get to over 2.5 now with a strong performance today. One more player I want to talk about who works on the edge for them, Trayvon Walker, more of a traditional defensive end. He's 275, so I guess he's kind of a tweener in that Stephon Tuitt mode, I guess you could say, where he's maybe a 3-4 defensive end is what you're going to see him be at the NFL level if he plays that role. Sacked this year, tackle and a half so far for a loss. Not that productive necessarily, but you had the physical traits sometimes, which I think he does. You can get drafted and you will find a role for yourself in the NFL. So keep an eye on him today. And then when everyone talks about is Jordan Davis, obviously you can play him defensive tackle, you can play him nose tackle, wherever you want to classify him as. He's one of those disruptive interior forces in college football right now. Only has 3 tackles for loss and a sack and a half so far this season. But that doesn't really fully encapsulate what he means to his defense and what he does for this unit. He creates so many openings for the edge rushers. He creates so many openings for junior linebacker Nakobe Dean, who is arguably the best linebacker in this class. There's a lot of value for Dean, blitzing him, using him in blitzing role. He has 2 sacks already this year. He's super versatile. He's 225, 230, somewhere in that range. So he's about the size you're looking for now in current linebackers in the NFL, guys who can move, guys with range. Dean certainly has that. I would like to see him improve a little bit more in pass coverage, but this overall linebacker class is not great in coverage to begin with. So I think Dean's a guy who could be a first-round pick, could be a second-round pick as well. I'd probably lean more towards a second-round pick, but he'll be taken probably in the first 64 selections or so. All right, senior cornerback Derion Kendrick, Clemson transfer. Been solid so far this year. Not phenomenal. I don't think he's ever gotten back to the hype he had necessarily as a sophomore at Clemson. He's kind of trended down a little bit since then. I would think he would go in the first two days of the draft, so rounds 1 through 3. Probably not a first-round pick considering how deep this cornerback class is with first-round talent, and he's not really in that group anymore. Last year he could have been, but this year definitely not. Something in day 2, rounds 2 or 3, somewhere in that range. He's going to be taken probably in the first 90 selections or so, probably top 100 selections at the very least. But it's going to be hard to necessarily overlook some of the tape he put up against Ohio State and even LSU during that one championship game. It's going to be hard to overlook some of the issues he had covering those wide receivers. To my knowledge, Taiki Smith, the junior safety West Virginia transfer, who's on Georgia right now, is not playing today. He's been battling injuries all year long. Him and Louis Cine, I believe I say his last name. I'm probably butchering that last name again. But those are two of the best safety. It's one of the best safety duos in college football. If he's just healthy. Again, Taiki Smith, to my knowledge, not playing today. Lewis, on the other hand, is, and Lewis is having a great year so far. He's got an interception, 4 passes defensed. Really boosting his draft stock so far this year, moving up in the ranks. Not a first-round pick by any means to me. This is a very deep safety class, by the way. There are probably going to be 3, well, it could be up to 3 or 4 safeties taken in the first round this year, which is highly irregular. But we'll see how that plays out. To me, he's more of a mid-round selection, but there's a lot of guys, like even Jalen Catalan, like I mentioned, a very deep safety class this year. We'll see how it plays out. But this is a player who can make a significant impact for Georgia in their secondary, especially with Smith sideline. So we'll see how this all plays out. It's going to be a great matchup, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out today. Hopefully it's a good one. I'm really hoping for a very close matchup. There are a lot of great matchups today, though. It's a great day for me not to have to go into work. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, thank you guys for watching. Check out the other videos. I'm going to be posting more throughout the day. Check out the other prospects to watch videos on this channel. Again, hopefully you subscribe if you... Wow, I'm really butchering this ending. Hopefully you subscribe if you like what you saw in this video today. But for now, thank you. I'll talk to you all later.